You are my sunshine, my only sunshine.
Mm.
You make me
Mm.
happy, wicka wicka when skies are gray. You know, hit a little remix. Been jamming out to Christina Perry
Fire.
recently, dude. She's got a whole album. It's called Songs for Rosie. I think she's probably covering it for a kid,
Is
but
that her kid's name, Rosie?
I'm not sure. But it's just like a bunch of like really good songs. I think like lullabies, but hey, you remember "Human" by Christina Perry?
Yeah, I think so.
That shit was it just like came on to my thing. It's like I'm only human.
Dude, all right, so that just got me thinking, right? So you know how she makes songs for like Rosie? We should make kind of like remix songs for Cash PTs, but just on like different like topics like, hey, like you take my insurance or about what we're gonna be talking about today, money mindset, right? But we just kind of jam it into kind of these like dope ass like lullabies and stuff that people are able to kind of catch on to. And then now they can like go into the clinic and they're like jamming out to it.
We're making remixes. We're not gonna tell you what song it is, and you just got to be able to guess it. Today we're gonna be breaking down something that I think will be super interesting. I think everyone goes through it, and every single time you feel like you've conquered this, I think something else kind of comes in and puts you back into limiting mindsets again. But thoughts about like money, right? I think they always creep up, and everyone's gotten limiting mindsets around money until you finally realize that one, some of this comes from parents. Two, some of this comes from like your relationship with it. But man, where do we even go, Peter? Where do we even go when we just talk about money mindset?
Dude, I mean, I can easily just kind of kick it off with like how I first started with like my prices, and I think a lot of physical therapists can kind of appreciate and understand this as well too, right? Because I think a lot of times when we do start out in an insurance setting, we're we feel like we're taught our entire value is pretty much based around like a $30 or $50 copay. And it's like, hey, like that's how much we are worth when it comes to being able to change somebody's lives. And so that's like all we have to be able to compare to from like a previous experience, right? And so all of a sudden when we transition out, we start charging like cash rates. It's like almost like I remember when I first started, my like initial single session rate was like 150, right? And so to go from like $30 to 150, like what is that, like a 5x multiplier, right? So it's like when you think of it like that, it's just like holy shit, like is this even possible? But then you slowly realize like and I think we talk about a lot about this, right? It's like everything's relative to what you've experienced before in the past or your surrounding environments. And now, like a lot of the people that I'm kind of interacting with and what I see, they're charging anywhere between 10K to 15K and sometimes even 20K. So now, like with a lot of the prices, it's just a number really at the end of the day, right? But yeah, it's definitely something that I think people will people probably kind of adjust to based on different time frames and different timelines. But yeah, you almost kind of have to see like proof of concept, right? It's like, hey, all right, are people going to pay me like this 150 rate? And then all of a sudden, you think people tell you to raise your rates. And I remember when I raised my rates to like 180, I was like, holy shit, like, are people going to pay this? Am I just not going to have customers the next week or what? But, obviously, as you know it as well, too, it's completely just a self-limiting mindset. Like, as long as you can provide the value that your customers are able to perceive, then it's like, it doesn't matter what the price is. Like, they're going to buy because they value it and they want the transformation and the outcome that you're trying to provide them.
That is that's actually a great point. I actually never thought about that because I went straight into like a one-on-one model upon graduating. So like we never had like you never hear on the side it's like, oh, you ran out of visits, so you can't even pay your copay anymore. But our out of pocket rate is $75 or like $100, right? And people are like, oh my gosh, that's so much. I can never pay that, because I remember that as an aid. So that's a great point. We almost have to zoom out and realize that like the people that kind of come through an insurance model, while a lot of them do want to get better, there's also a handful of people that don't necessarily want to get better, and there's also a handful of them that they don't know any other model, meaning they think that that's expensive for physical therapy because it is for that case, I would say,
Hmm.
right? I would never pay $50 to go to that kind of $50 session. They would have to pay me money to sit through those sessions because we were just walking by a clinic that opened in Astoria by us. Christy and I were walking last night, and I peeked in, and it was two physical therapists talking to each other in age shadowing and like watching the patient. And
Hmm.
this is at night, so the clinic wasn't busy, and the guy was just on the table doing cat camels by himself. I'm like,
Oh,
fucking $50 for that, you know?
yeah,
I wouldn't even take that if it was for free. Like you would have to pay me $100 to be there because it's just a waste of time.
for sure.
So I think like that's what we have to understand. It's like there's certain people that don't necessarily value what you do, right? And it's no fault to anybody. It's just the fact that they haven't been exposed to these things. We had someone in our coaching calls, and they're like, I'm feeling a certain type of way because like the people that I've been talking to say it's a little bit too expensive, so it feels kind of
Hmm.
ridiculous to raise my prices. But I was like, dog, have you had people pay these prices before? Yes. So let's stop focusing on the people that won't pay you the prices and that don't value what you sell, right? Like you
Hmm.
should start focusing on the people that do, and that's going to completely shift your mindset. And I think that's one thing I've come to realize. It's like I grew up with parents that don't necessarily prioritize their health, and when I meet people that do, and I'm like, holy cow, they'll pay more. They'll pay more for that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's a great point that you made where, a lot of times people compare our prices to what their perception of physical therapy is. And a lot of times their perception of physical therapy is the traditional insurance model, right? And it's exactly what you said. Hey, like one person, one PT getting treating multiple clients at once, having them do arbitrary exercises on the table that may not have any kind of meaning or correlation to their end goal. It's like, yeah, you can't pay me to go through that, right? But a lot of times that's really what people experience. And so like in their head, if that's all they've ever known, then it's like, yeah, it makes no sense for me to pay almost double or triple that. And so a lot of it really comes just down to like, hey, can we educate our clients or the person in front of us to help them understand, hey, like this is completely different than what you've experienced before in the past. And a lot of times, I don't even like necessarily comparing like or calling ourselves like, hey, like this is physical therapy that we provide. When in reality, it's like an entire transformation that we're providing, right? And so one of the things that really helped me kind of like change this mindset was that, hey, what we're really selling them, or really what we're providing them from a solution standpoint is the outcome that they are wanting. It's not necessarily like a physical therapy session, right? We're being at the end of the day, what this like 2K, 4K package that or program that we're able to like take them through is ultimately going to get them that transformation. And when you frame it like that, it's like, hey, is it worth it to to spend $2,000 so that you can finally resolve this chronic low back pain that you've had for the last 3 years? And when you kind of say it like that versus like, hey, you're paying like $200 for a physical therapy session, it's just completely different from the way the person in front of you kind of views it.
I love that. And it's for us, it's like, and one thing we always talk about, it's like, are we competing for a price or are we competing for value, right? Because you're
Yeah.
competing for price, then you're just going to keep either, down cutting one another. And then eventually you're just charging fucking nothing. And that's what reimbursement contracts and stuff are like. Are you
Hmm.
going to compete for value? What can I do for this person that they won't be able to get anywhere else? And if I can handle that, right, whatever problem that they have, and I'm the only person that can handle that problem, or the only person that they've been exposed to that can handle that problem, well, I'm going to be a very valuable person. And I'm valuable. I can charge whatever I'm worth because I'm no longer competing for the same thing as you are.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. A lot of times too, it's like we were just kind of talking about that, where it's like, hey, like sessions versus outcome. And I think a lot of times too, like with physical therapy, all we ever know is sessions, right? So it's like, hey, what's the single price per rate? And I know this is something that we talk about a lot of times with our coaching groups. It's like, hey, if we always kind of anchor to a single price per session, especially too as like cash physical therapy is getting more and more popular, then eventually it's like, hey, if you continue to like price cut, then eventually it's just going to be a straight shot to the bottom of the barrel, right? We never want to do that. You always want to anchor as like, hey, what is the outcome that we want to get you to? And then is that outcome that you desire, is that value enough? Is that enough value that exceeds whatever price that we're asking for them? It's like the same exact way, like, people buy, $150 cars, right? It's like, why do they buy that, right? It's because they value it, even though it's the same thing as like maybe like a $5,000 car that will get them from point A to point B.
The the one thing I always think about, it's like you almost need to like understand like where some of these thoughts come from, right? And I think unpacking those things, it's like, were your parents ever people that actually splurge on anything themselves? Because I think a
Dude,
lot of people,
absolutely not, man.
Yeah, like a lot of people that come from like immigrant parents,
Yeah.
or honestly, like any kind of parents, right, that feel guilty about spending money on themselves opposed to their children. They almost like, ah, man, it's all subconscious. Like you just see that your parents have never enjoyed themselves, taken themselves out to nice dinners or hotels, or like gave themselves the worst piece of cut of the steak. Like they just didn't feel like they deserve anything. They want to give everything to their kids, and that's amazing. But also just shows your kids like scarcity mindset, and that shit becomes ingrained.
Yeah.
So when you realize that there's adults out there that do prioritize these things, it's an absolute game changer because one, it just shows you a different type of living that you might not necessarily be used to, and those things can make a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, for sure, man. And it's like there are people out there who 100% value their health and wellness and really care about their body and prioritizing it, and they're willing to pay for it. So why are we so focused on like trying to attract maybe everybody, right, including the demographic who may not value these services, right? So it's like we don't necessarily need to service those people. We're not the best fit for everybody, and that's totally okay. I think a lot of times I knew like for sure like this is something that I struggle with is like when I came into this industry, I was like I thought I had to be able to help everybody, right? But in reality, it's not. It's like we just need to focus on the type of people that like really value this type of service that we're able to provide and hone in and be able to provide value for them. And how do we actually market and track that demographic so that when they do come in, they feel like, wow, like this is exactly what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and the hardest person to sell to is going to be the person that has never been to physical therapy before, like without a doubt. So like if you ever because you have nothing to measure against, right?
Yep.
Wow, like or what'll happen? It's like you sell them once, and then they're like, "Oh wow, it's expensive, but you know what? It's worth it." And then the second time, they'll be like, "I'm gonna try somewhere else. Like I just want to pay," and they'll come back like, "Yep, you're the right place the first time." So when you have something to compare it to, it's so much easier to understand like why what you do is valuable. But the goal is hopefully that you're communicating that within your marketing messages. Other things to start to think about is like this is kind of an important conversation. It's like, what is enough for yourself, right? Because like maybe you're overcoming some of these mindset stuff, and now you're able to sell packages and you're seeing some success. But you also have to start to realize like what is enough for yourself, right? Where like you're good to go, and like anything else is just like extra on top. Because if you just keep moving the goalposts of like, oh, this is what I need. Okay, I'm successful now. I need to buy more clothes, luxury items. I got to buy this really expensive car, and I got to do all these things. Like you're gonna run yourself to the ground. And for you, Peter, like, have you thought about that? Like, what is enough for you financially?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, a lot of my like mindset has shifted over the years, and so like at the very beginning, when like your back is against the wall, I'm just literally trying to sell out of desperation, right? It's like for me, I'm like, dude, I have to be able to sell this person, otherwise like I'm not going to be able to make rent this month, right? And so same thing when I brought on my first PT, I was like, holy shit, like I've got to sell, otherwise I'm not going to be able to pay for this, right? And so a lot of it kind of comes out of this like this scarcity mindset. But now like a lot of times, like again, like thankfully we're in like a much better space or much better position now than where we were before. Now a lot of times, like what the same thing what I tell my staff is like, don't be so focused. Like you got to become detached from the sale. And again, it's like way easier said than done, right? Especially when you have like all this stuff you're stressed about, like payroll, rent, all these other things. But when you can really just become focused on like, hey, like can I help this person in front of me? If I can, then it is my ethical duty to be able to sell them the solution that I'm able to provide them. Right? And so you just become like, so now, like, whenever I do sell, like, I'm totally detached from the situation. Like, I can sleep good at night because I know that I've done everything that I can in my power in that 1 hour session with them in the evaluation to be able to show them, hey, like, this is what we're dealing with, and this is like what we're able to help you out with from a solution standpoint to help you overcome this chronic thing that you've been able to deal with. And at the end of the day, like the decision is totally up to them. And I think a lot of times, like physical therapists, they always kind of get this like slimy sensation, like, oh, like I hate sales. Like it's like, oh, it's so gross. But in reality, like sales is service. Like, how are we supposed to help someone if we can't even like we can't show them all the information that is in front of them in order for them to make like an appropriate decision for them at the end of the day. So if you can kind of start thinking about it like that time from that mindset where it's like, hey, forget about the price, right? Like forget about the price. Literally it's just, hey, this person is in front of me, can I help them? If I can, okay, what is the most appropriate solution that I can be able to get them, and then just view it from that lens.
Yeah. I love the detaching yourself from the actual sale, because you're right. Like no one, you can't force anyone to pay you money, and the reason why you should care about these things is like just you're listening now, you've got limiting mindsets. The person that you're selling to has also got limiting mindsets, right? They're thinking, is this actually going to work? Oh, no one can fix me, and a lot of these things. But if you have a very, very clear picture in your head of how you're going to help this person, you have to help them address those limiting mindsets. You have to help them address these objections, because if on the other side of them giving you money is them living a significantly better life, you've failed them if you haven't conquered these limiting mindsets on money, limiting mindsets on sales and marketing, etc.
Yeah, because if we think about like what are their other alternatives, a lot of times it's either like one of these three options, right? They either progressively get worse and they get surgeries or some sort of unnecessary injections, or they just remain exactly where they are and they continue to become more and more deconditioned because they're not able to become active and work out because of this like limiting irritability. Right. So at the end of the day, it's like, are we actually helping them if we don't actually help them see like what is actually in front of them? Right. And so it's 100% like our ethical duty to be able to provide, especially like at the end of the day, right? Like what we're selling actually works. And that's why I feel like, both me and you, we're able to speak with so much conviction because we know the stuff works. And especially compared to the other alternatives they have, it's like, it's way better. And so, $2,000, $3,000, it's a drop in the bucket when you look at like, hey, compared to like a $15,000 surgery, right? And again, like even after the $15,000 surgery, it's like they still got to go through like 6 to 9 months of like shitty insurance physical therapy that ultimately causes them whatever X amount of like dollars copay.
Exactly. There's going to be people that like haven't had progressive resistance training, haven't had a plyometric program, haven't had an actual chance in getting back to doing what they love because their physical therapists that they've been exposed to has no understanding of strength and conditioning. Then they're potentially opting in for like a PRP or a stem cell injection that is always out of pocket, and that can easily run you 3 to 5 thousand, right? And those are things to think about. It's like people desperately want to feel better, right? There's a lot of people that desperately want to feel better. And it's your goal to make sure that you position yourself as a solution if you can genuinely actually solve the problem. Now, again, if you're listening to this and you're fucking cracking people's backs and telling them that that's going to eliminate their type 1 diabetes, like don't fucking use these tactics, and don't, try to use the things that we teach in this podcast because you're a snake oil salesman. But chances are you're a performance based or performance minded physical therapist. You do some shit that's actually solid and going to deliver value. Don't be afraid.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I mean we could probably learn from chiropractors is that like when they go to chiropractic school, dog, they like believe that shit like all the way deep down into the soul, man. And that's why like they come out and they have no issues like selling like anywhere between like $6,000 to $10,000 like year-long plans of care, and all they're doing is because they literally believe that hey, they're like realigning people's like backs and like able to like solve nervous system issues, right, and increase someone's fertility and stuff. And for them, like they truly deep down believe it, right? Because that's what they were taught in school, and so they're able to like sell with that much conviction. And at the end of the day, like a lot of it really is comes down to like how well does a person in front of you believe that you are the right person for them, right? And so if like yeah, like if we have like other chiropractors, again, not knocking chiropractors, I think chiropractors great. There's great chiropractors out there, but we have people out there like selling $5,000 to $10,000 like worth of solutions, right? Even though, hey, may or may not be research backed. It's like, why can't we do our due diligence and just like sell what we believe, right? Even at a fraction. Like I always tell people, I'm like, I tell my team, I was like, dude, we should probably raise our price to like 5K, man. We have chiropractors down the street selling year-long life-changing adjustments for 5K. Like, why can't we charge that shit?
Yeah. One thing that I think will, kind of, this is like when you're starting to come along and like launching your practice and trying to sell your first plan of care. These are probably some of the things you have to realize. But I think when you start to be fairly successful, you get kind of, and this is something that I've unpacked myself, right? It's like you're almost like scared of all the success going away, and like you're just thinking, oh, I need more, 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 more. And I think that's a terrible mindset to kind of operate a business in, because you're just constantly in scarcity. You're scarcity driven. You're thinking about survival. How do you navigate that, Peter, as like a business owner, where it's like you're never going to have the same amount of cash flow coming in every single month, right? And no matter what, if you're PRing 3, 4, 5 months in a row, at some point you're going to dip. And whenever that dip happens, we're always thinking, oh shit, gotta close the doors, right? Like, what is your framework or thought process around that?
Yeah, I think, dude, I think it's just changed tremendously over years. I think really for me, like I'm super risk averse, man. But really, I think what has helped me tremendously over the years is I've just like seen enough proof, right? Like same thing with the way we like speak with conviction when we've solved like so much low back pain cases before in the past, because we know that, hey, like this shit works. So I think a lot of it also comes through with business as well too, right? Maybe it's like that first year where your revenue is kind of up and down. You're really just like, hey, man, dude, I really don't know if we're going to be able to make it. But then all of a sudden, it's like the following year, the revenue continues to skyrocket, right? Maybe it's like, hey, we have a little bit of a dip. And then now we're on year 5 now. And I have like 5 years worth of like proof to know, like, hey, like, even if we have like a bad week and the evals don't come in, like, I know, like, the phones will start ringing the following week, right? Or, hey, we have all these kind of other systems set up in place to kind of mitigate like these like lower months that do come in. So a lot of it really is, I think, confidence also in yourself as you slowly start to build up more and more, proof over the years that, hey, like this thing can work and is sustainable. And hopefully, if you're out there and you're just starting out, like cash physical therapy, it's like getting more and more popular. And I know for me, like when we both started in like 2020, like there really wasn't much out there of like people doing it successfully, right? So a lot of times we're kind of like almost the pioneers, and we're just kind of like testing it out and seeing like, hey, is this like even like a sustainable model? But now, we're 5 years in, and it's like, hey, we're able to build out a full team. We can scale to multiple locations. So it's like, hey, this is absolutely something that is like a very viable business model, and you just have to trust in yourself, right? Like you got to bet on yourself at the end of the day. And I think, one of the things that we talked about in the past is like looking at what's the worst case scenario, like what's the worst case outcome, right? It's like, all right, worst case outcome, maybe like our revenue dips a little bit. Okay, so what? Like we still have the following month, right? We still have reserves that we can dip into and still pay our team, so that's okay. And then worst comes to worst comes to worst, right? It's like, hey, hypothetically speaking, like what happens if all of my PTs leave and like I'm stuck with all these clients? Like, okay, well, that probably just means I have to step in and like treat a little bit more. But then so what? Like we can always just bring on another PT and help out with that, right? So like if you think about our worst case scenario is like, hey, okay, we go back into treatment full time, and we have to like, we got to sell packages, we got to market, we got to sell. But like I've been there, I've done that, and so I know what I'm capable of. And so I think like, yeah, like worst case scenario, it's really not that bad. But yeah, what about you, man? I think one of the things that you've mentioned before on this podcast is like, hey, worst comes to worst, like if the business fails, you'll still you'll do like Uber Eats or something like that, right? And you'll figure out a way to make it work.
No, that was kind of in the beginning phases where like we didn't know what was going to happen. And I was like, hey, like as we're starting, I'm like, Chrissy, don't stress it. Like I'm good to go. Like I could work really, really hard and like be able to handle, just like overtime hours in whatever job. Like I can eat shit. I don't mind eating shit. But I'm similar to you in a sense that like, we had a full time physical therapist leave in December, and I was like, ah, damn, this really sucks. But I just stepped back in the mix because I just made a personal mistake, business mistake, right? I didn't have. We had 2 people ready to start, but that wasn't going to happen until February.
Mm,
So I stepped in January, things were fine, and then February came around, and another full time physical therapist is leaving, but we're kind of in a good place because we have 2 people that are ready to start. And these are things that I used to always say like, oh man, like I wish there was a better time, but there's no good time for any of these things to happen. Like you just literally have to understand what is the game plan. Always have like another move in your pocket. Always make sure that like you can put out these fires because the worst case scenario probably has happened in the past year, and we're fine,
yeah.
right? Like not like living in the streets. So if the worst case scenario has happened and I can handle all of it, it's like, okay, well, that just has given me proof now that like most of the time we just figure these things out. And one thing that I always think about in my head, it's like when good things happen, what are we doing? Same exact stuff. Waking up in the morning, trying to get better. When bad things happen, what are we doing? The same exact shit. I'm waking up, trying to get a little bit better. And if bad things are happening, good things are happening, I'm always trying to get a little bit better and try to provide value. Like I think as long as you're keeping those things constant, you're good to go. What tends to happen with a lot of people though is when marketing and stuff is going really, really well and they're having great lead flow, they stop marketing.
Yeah.
they dip, right? And then they're like, "Well, what happened?" I'm like, "Well, you stopped, right?" So it's like I've come to realize it's like similar to you. The worst case scenario, we can handle it. I never put myself in a situation where I won't be able to handle the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
right? Like if every PT left today, I can step in and I'd be able to take care of everything. I would be able to probably bring on someone pretty quickly. We've built the onboarding system better, so like we can get people up to speed quicker. So the worst case scenario is handled, and then your own habits. Like, what are you able to do? Well, I'm always gonna keep doing what I'm doing and keep getting better, uh, personally, professionally. And we haven't done anything crazy in a sense of like buying obscene things, right? Like, I don't have crazy car payments. I drive a 2015 Honda Accord still, and it's just a share between Christy and I. Our rent is fairly priced, so it's like none of these things are things that were like, holy cow. We were about to move into a beautiful apartment, but like that would have increased our rent almost 1.5 times, and I'm glad that we didn't because I think being able to stay lean in some regard allows you to have more flexibility.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people kind of sometimes like fall trapped to is like as their like revenue increases, like their lifestyle habits like also creep up as well too, right? And I think it's a great point, exactly what you said, right? Like, hey, we continue riding those like Asian branded cars, right? Honda, Toyota. You know, I got a Toyota Tacoma, and you know, I know that thing's gonna like I'm probably gonna drive until for the next like 15, 20 years just because I know it's just going to last me forever. Right? It's like, hey, we're not out here like ripping like Lambos and stuff just for the hell of it. Maybe one day we can, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, what's our goal? What's our purpose? And if our goal is to be able to help impact as many people as possible, okay, hey, let's go ahead, let's put profits back into the business and continue to help grow it and scale. And, you know, I think it's, a lot going back to kind of what you were talking about, like experiencing these more stressful situations. I think sometimes it's actually a good thing, right? Because it actually shows you, hey, like this is actually what I'm capable of handling. And it's like we can probably handle a lot more than we actually think we can, but we won't know that until that situation has actually experienced. So now, you know, it's the same thing. This is also a little bit of a mindset shift that I have over the years. It's like now, whenever something hard does happen, I almost kind of view it as like, okay, cool, this is actually a good thing because now it's I'm challenging myself to see like how can I handle this stressful, quote unquote stressful situation, because I know if I'm able to overcome this, that means in the future, like everything else is going to seem like negligent. It's going to seem super easy because I've had to overcome and experience this like one stressful situation.
Yeah, there's this weird like feeling where it's like, I'm working with a life coach and a high performance coach, and it's like whenever I have these realizations, I get hyped because these realizations usually are what needs to occur before action occurs. We had someone in the mentorship. He had a PR month, but he didn't crack a specific number. But he mentioned something. He's like, "But my mindset improved significantly. I PR'd this month. I didn't hit the number that I was targeting, but my mindset improved." And I'm like, the fact that your mindset improves already tells me that PR is like that number that you want is right around the corner, because that's what usually occurs before everything else in your life changes. But one thing to really think about is that it's not moving the goalpost that far. Because I was kind of reflecting on it the past week, and I was like, man, it was a dope podcast. John Paul, I forget the guy's name, but he started Paul Mitchell and Patron, and he was talking to Noah Kagan, and he talks about Noah was like, "Hey, when did you know that you were going to make it?" And John Paul is someone that sold Patron for a couple of billion, and Paul Mitchell's worth over $1 billion, the hair product. And he's like, "I knew that I was going to make it when I was able to pay my bills on time. It took like a year or so, but I was able to pay my bills on time." And in his perspective, it was like that was enough. He was able to pay his bills on time. He was able to live. He was able to have food, roof over his head. And he's like, I believed in my product so much that when I was able to, pay my bills on time, I was already happy to do the work that I was able to do. Right. And I think that's a great position to kind of put yourself in, where it's like your bottom line is taken care of. You're not buying stuff for the sake of buying stuff to impress people that you don't necessarily care about, but your bottom line is taken care of, and you actually get to do work that you enjoy. And then I was reflecting on it because when I first started Moment, I was like, all I want to be able to do is, make at least 10K per month and be able to do work that I like to do, pay rent, go out on a couple of nice dinners, every couple of months. And like, I'm good. Like, and then I just move the goalposts forward more and more myself. But when you zoom back on this journey, it's like, man, there's fucking abundance everywhere. And I think that
100%.
one of the reasons why people have money mindset issues is because they keep pushing the goalposts. Their cost of living keeps getting significantly higher,
Yeah,
and it's like it's not even serving you.
for sure. I think one of the things that I realized this year too is there are multiple ways you can move the goalposts. And so when you have multiple ways that you can kind of track improvement and track wins, like we talk about this all the time, dude, you can't lose, right? When you have so many different variables that you can track improvements on, that's not just top line revenue. It's like, hey, okay, what are other little facets in my life, in my business that I'm like making progress on? And ultimately, these little things are going to help, move the big needle forward, whether that's top line revenue, total number of visits. And so I think a lot of times you can kind of view it as like different seasons, right? Like you have seasons of scale where it's like, yeah, like top line revenue is increasing, where we got hit a PR month of new evals, new visits, right? But then you also have like seasons of like more kind of like building and growth, right? Where maybe you're you didn't necessarily hit a PR month, but you increase your mindset, which will ultimately help you 2 or 3 months down the line hit a larger PR month because you're able to increase your prices, change your mindset. Or hey, like what y'all did these last couple of months, you guys maybe didn't necessarily increase PR, but you guys went back and refined your onboarding process, and for whenever a new hire does come on, right? So these are all little things that like hell yeah, like they improve the overall like capacity of what the business is able to do now, because now whenever a new hire does come on, they're able to be that much more efficient, right? So you have like different seasons of like refining systems, SOPs, and maybe it's not reflected on your top line revenue and the P&L, but ultimately like it's going to help set the foundation for the seasons of scale a couple months later down the line. So if you can kind of view it as like, hey, I've got multiple ways that I can win every single month, no matter what the situation is, dude, you become unstoppable, man, when you view it from that mindset.
Yeah, there's like it was a great podcast on My First Million. They're like, we had a slumber party with a bunch of billionaires. I'm like, man, great title. But essentially, Mr. Beast hosts a basketball camp and a bunch of people get invited. And like, people that have like very interesting jobs and careers will spend time together the whole weekend, play ball, camp, etc.
I love
And
that.
they interviewed a bunch of billionaires, and they're like, found a couple of things. Some billionaires love fucking playing the game. They're so into the game. Some billionaires still have limiting mindsets about like how to play the game and stuff. And then some of them were just like, whatever I want, I can create. Like anything I want in this life, I know I can create. And I'm like, man, that is fucking dope. Because I genuinely believe it now, right? It's like whatever you want in this life, you can create it. It's just a matter of like believing yourself. And also, one thing I realize is most people at a very high level are doing what you're doing, Peter, right? It's like they don't measure success in like one solid way. It's very fluid. So if you are very rigid in how you get to this end goal, you see things in a very scarce mindset, right? Like everything that isn't this is a failure. Whereas if you see success as very, very fluid, then everything is a fucking win because everything seems to be happening for you, right? Instead of happening to you. So Peter's perspective is right. It's like, I can feel bad about the past year, but I'm like, it is what it is. Like I became a better entrepreneur out of it, got better perspective, growed my mindset, realized things that we can improve on. But take this perspective. Let's say you're doing, 50K a month and you're killing yourself. And then the following year, you're doing 50K a month and you've offloaded everything, right? Your revenue number hasn't jumped, but your lifestyle PR has been boom, 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 like skyrocketing,
Yeah.
right? So being able to see success, I think, in a lot of different ways is crucial because if you're only measure it with like top line revenue, you're probably going to be super stressed out because those are things out of your control. But can you measure it in like, hey, I PR'd, I saw the least amount of sessions I've seen this month, and now I'm still making the same money. I've got way more time on my hands. Oh, we didn't hit a PR top line revenue, but we have all the back end operation systems in play. Like, there are certain things that do occur when you start to scale beyond yourself. There's going to be a month or two where you stop seeing as many patients and revenue will stay the same or drop a little bit, and it's going to get super uncomfortable, but that's only because that's setting you up to offload to other therapists and have that stuff occur. So I think in life, like I truly believe that you can have whatever it is you want. And you look at most billion dollar companies all of these companies pivoted, right?
Yeah.
Slack was a completely different company. It wasn't a messaging board before. It was like some other random thing. So it's like every company that's done really, really well, they've pivoted. They didn't hold rigid to like what it looked like one way. They were open. They were open to new opportunities.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think a lot of it really is like your company will only get as better as you get better. Right. Otherwise, like, yeah, if you continue to have a lot of these like limiting mindsets, like, oh, like I'll never be able to do X, Y, Z, then yeah, like 100% your company is never going to. Right. But a lot of these small things, like, and, even to this day, like me and you, we still have these like mindset shifts and we're like 5 years into the business. Right. But it's all these little different shifts that we've had that's evolved. Honestly, a lot of it is due to, I think, just like hanging out with like other people and being around other people that are like better than us. Right. And it's like, when you get exposed to that environment, it's like, holy shit, like this is what's possible. Okay, if they can do it, like that probably means like I can do it too. But yeah, man, like mindsets, I didn't really realize how important mindset was until probably like a couple years ago. I remember when we first started, it's like you have all these like different mindset like modules and stuff you go through, and I kind of used to kind of just like poo poo it. But now like looking back, it's like wow, it's like actually something that I'm still like working on a daily ongoing basis, man.
I would say mindset is the most important thing,
Yeah.
straight up. Like, there's no amount, like, because it's going to be the foundation where you layer in all the other stuff, right? Like your strategies and your tactics. But like, if you don't have a right mindset, you don't even see these things as like opportunities or potential ways to grow. Um, but yeah, I've loved the mindset stuff because I'm like, man, I'm a fucking loser. Like, as I'm starting to unpack these things, I start cracking up to myself. I'm like, you're a fucking jabroni. That's a scrub ass way to think about things, man. Come on. And it makes you so much more resilient, though. Like, and
100%.
it's like you almost have to go into this woo woo type shit in order
Yeah.
to start to address it because it's not something where it's like so tangible. It's like it's all in. You're just fucking
All in your
processing.
mind. Yeah.
But here's one thing, right? It's like if you don't think your limiting mindset on money can change, that's exactly where you're going to be. But just remember, it's like the same system that creates an adaptation is the same system that creates a maladaptation. The only thing that changes is the input, right? And your inputs can change. And here's one fun experiment I'll give you. If you go on vacation and you rent a car, rent something that you won't ever get normally, right? Like you might be getting like a Kia Sorento or a Hyundai Elantra or some shit. I don't know. I guarantee you, you drive that car for a fucking couple of days, right? And then you go back home, and if you live in like a mid-sized city, you're gonna fucking see that car everywhere, right? Because your mind has picked it up as something that is exists, and now when you go home, you're gonna see that car fucking everywhere in the streets parked. And that's the same thing. Your mindset just changed. Your perspective on something just changed. So like all of these things are possible. You just got to change your input. Your input was renting a car. Now you can see that car everywhere. You just have to rent something else, like rent the book, read something.
Change your mindset, change your life.
Yeah, exactly. Other, money mindset stuff, man, is like pick a number that like kind of makes you sweat a little bit.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, like I think once you get a little bit of sweat in your hands, that's probably the right number. And then from there, you just slowly, slowly build on it. But when we first started, you said you were at 150. I was at 175.
Yeah. But it's like you pick a number that's uncomfortable and you like test it for like a week and then play the worst case scenario outcome, right? Like, okay, worst case outcome, like what happens? Okay, maybe people say no. Okay, cool. Well, then so what? Maybe you can always just go back down to your regular price if you really wanted to. But what happens if they say yes? Right? So it's like, you really have nothing to lose. And again, you don't have to like change the entire thing overnight. You can literally just like experiment it out on a couple of new evals, like to kind of see like what the what the response rate is like. And a lot of times you really be surprised, man. Like yeah, like our conversion rate has stayed pretty much the same, and we've just like steadily increased our rates steadily over the course of time. And so I mean, if you guys want to hear like a stat that kind of hopefully makes you feel better, it's like, average conversion rate for like in person higher ticket sales, right? So higher ticket meaning, hey, around like at least $1,500 or more is around like 30%. And so I heard, so this is something that I heard. It's like, hey, like if you're converting around like 90% right now, you can probably raise your prices all the way up until you're converting around like 50%. Right. Otherwise, if you're not getting any kind of friction at all, probably means that like your prices are either like, or just like really way too low, or you're like just getting only word of mouth. And if you're getting only word of mouth, those people are going to buy from you anyways, regardless if you sell them a $500 thing or like a $5,000 thing. So you might as well sell them the more expensive thing.
There's something important that I think we should point out. It's the fact that, like you said, but what if it's better? Right? Like, and I think if something to kind of take away from this podcast, I think is that, right? Like, if you encounter every single scenario and you always ask yourself, oh, what, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, right? The bad thing is going to happen. You never think about, oh, well, what if something could change, right? Like, what if something changes for the better? What if you're making more money because of it? What if you get more time back because of it? Like, if you're someone that always sees things from that negative perspective, and don't be the person like, oh, I'm just a practical person. It's like, bro, you're killing yourself early because optimists live longer, right? Like, if you're miserable and you always see things from a negative perspective, start to flip that switch. And it doesn't have to feel like super authentic to yourself. Just make it intentional. Like, you can still say the negative thing. A PR and evolution for you is acknowledging that you said a negative thing, right? Like, oh, the negative thing is going to happen, and realizing, but what if the positive thing happens? And eventually, if you keep doing that, all you'll think about is, what if the positive thing happens, and you don't even think about the negative thing as much. But yeah, man, that is there's people that are so scared of the conversion rate to drop, but it's like, over time, one, it's going to force you to get better, but two, you don't need to convert as many people if your rates are higher.
Yeah, 100%. I love what you said, man. You got to look at only like what's the upside. If you focus so much more on the positive and what the upside is, like you won't even default to think about the negative. But yeah, if all you ever think about is the negative, 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 then exactly that's 100% what you're gonna like visualize, right? So yeah, changing mindset about that is huge. And I think one of the things that people have to understand, especially for all you guys who are like solopreneurs right now, is if your goal is to be able to like grow a team, scale a team, and be able to impact that much more people with the team, you're not going to be able to afford a team charging like $150 or under $200. And it's like eventually, if your staff PTs, dude, they're going to want like all the benefits, right? They want a regular salary, yeah, they want PTO, they want health insurance. Like, dog, how are you going to be able to pay for that if you're charging like $150? How are you going to have money to put into ads? How are you going to have money to put into like a front desk sales team, right? To be able to afford all this so that you can help more people. It's like, yeah, if your goal is to just be able to like be a solopreneur, then yeah, really, you can probably charge whatever you want. You can charge as low as like 110. I think there's like a couple of people in our town that are charging like 120 to 150, but they're all solo providers inside gyms, dude. It's like they can only help so many people. Like our average rate across our team is around like 250 to 275. But it's like we've got a full on team, and the amount of people that we're able to help and impact on a yearly basis is like 10x, like all those like solo providers, But we're only able to do that when you charge a certain amount that you can allocate and put back into investing in your team to bring on high level A talent, to be able to invest in ads and all these other things that helps a regular business run.
Yeah, and if you, let's say, just charge 125, 25% of that's going to get collected by the gym. Depending on where you live, 20 to 30% of that gets collected by your tax, right? And then you got to put a little bit of profit. So like 10 to 20 bucks goes towards a profit account or a savings account. And how much are you getting paid? Probably less than what you would get paid if you just work for somebody else. So it's
Yeah.
like, why build a business to make less than you would work for someone else, to take on all this risk and all this stress, right? Like, you should charge appropriately because you want to be able to pay yourself accordingly for making the massive jump that you're making. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And to Peter's point, it's like, especially when it extends beyond yourself, because it's no longer your own well-being, your livelihood, it's the team's.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think one of the things that's like helped me a lot over the years is, yeah, just like being around other people that are charging either like more than me or the same or like a lot more than me, pretty much like where I want to be. And I know a lot of people that have like come into our coaching group, that's helped them out tremendously, right? Like they're coming in charging me like 120, 125, and all of a sudden they see like, boom, we've got like 50 other like PTs spread out throughout the country, and they're all like averaging around 200, 250. Okay, sweet. Like we've got Andy up here in like New York, cost of living super high, charging 300. We've got like another guy in our group. He's in like middle nowhere, Omaha, Nebraska, and same thing, charging like $300 a visit. And like a lot of it is really kind of this like limiting mindset. It's like, hey, nobody's going to pay that in my town, right? I'm in the like middle of nowhere, like super suburban, like people aren't going to pay that. But in reality, like people pay what they value. And a lot of times it's really just, maybe it's like you don't have proof of concept yet within your area or because of your past. But again, like, okay, well, look at all these other people around the country that are also in similar like demographics, if not even like lower demographics than your area that you're at.
Yeah, and once you work with enough people, this is one thing that you're going to find out. We see a lot of lawyers, and one of them I became really, really close friends with. I started working with the whole family, and a really funny bit. But I'm talking to the wife, and she's a really like up there lawyer, and she's like, "Yeah, like I was on a call with a client. And we had 3 lawyers in the team. It's like, dude, it's just insane. Like when we send these invoices to them, I'm like, just curious, like if you don't mind me asking, like what is it? 1,000 an hour per lawyer, right? To sit on
Love
on a
that.
so and then as I'm saying it, I'm like, motherfucker, I'm gonna like, yeah, what in the world are we doing? But again, right, like that family found it valuable. Like
Yeah.
that person, the husband who I encountered first, was supposed to get a double knee replacement, ended up getting back to playing tennis at a high level, running and all that stuff, completely virtual. We were able to handle that. The wife had a fully torn meniscus, bunion, previous ACL injury, and couldn't move her shoulders and do a push up. Handled all of that, right? So it's like there's people that have the money that can pay way more than what you're asking. Like that same person probably would pay me 1,000 an hour, right? Because they couldn't find any solutions anywhere else. And the people that they were seeing were helping quote unquote like professional sports teams local to their area, but they still weren't getting success, so they reached out virtually. So hearing that like a lawyer charges like 1,000 an hour, like
200
and
ain't nothing, man.
yeah, it's like and 120, it's like you're almost looking at like you're charging 120, bro. You got like problems. Like, is this service really gonna help? Because like,
Yeah, 100. It's like, is this thing even going to be valuable if it's only $120?
and to be completely honest, man, like it's becoming more and more normalized to go out of pocket
Yeah.
for medical services. Like it wasn't the case. Like I'm telling you right now, it's never been easier. Like 10 to 15 years ago, you probably had to fight through a lot of different barriers, right? But it's becoming way more common because healthcare has become a business and business is on the newspaper all the time. And you see people complaining about it. You see reports, you see these messages get amplified on Twitter, Instagram, where people are just frustrated with the healthcare system. So you can play to some of these frustrations and you've probably experienced it yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. I think there are a lot more people out there than we think that basically want to find the best in the area. And if they are calling around asking about price and stuff, and they hear, all right, hey, we've got a couple different, out of network cash PTs, right? They're all one on ones. This client is or this PT is charging 120 an hour. This other PT is charging $600 an hour. Okay, gee, I wonder who's the better expert here, right? The one who's charging 120 or the one who's charging $600 an hour. All right. And so I think, yeah, we just have to be able to understand. And I think I heard this somewhere. It's like, hey, you never want to be like stuck in the middle. You always either want to play, hey, be the most expensive in town, or you play the high volume game, which is what insurance plays, right? Hey, like be the cheapest in town so that you can get like a ton of volume in. Like same thing when they compare it to, like you get McDonald's, right? Same thing, super cheap, but they get a ton of volume in, or like high end steak restaurants. Not a lot of you got to call a reserve, right? The amount of volume of people they service aren't a lot, but these are all people that really value the overall experience that they're going to get there, and that's what we should strive to be.
Love that, man. Anything else, Peter? I think we covered a lot of bases today.
Dude, I think that was a ton of fire we just dropped, man.
Yeah. Fuck, always got to sneak in regular mindset shit in there, even though
You
we're
got
talking
it. It's so
mindset.
important.
But yo, speaking of PRs, hold the freaking phone because
Brrr.
I think we've been hitting a PR every single week on listens and stuff. But yo, we are at 8 5-star reviews, and I think that's kind of pathetic. Like it's dope that we've been getting some 5-star reviews, but man, how good would it feel, Peter, if we had 10 by next
Double
week?
digits, baby.
Yeah,
Double digits.
I think we might only have 8 listeners. That's why I only have 8 5-star reviews. But yo, if you guys love what you're hearing and these things are super helpful, you know, feel free to DM us. Let us know, because like that's the thing that feels great, right? When people are like, "Yo, this podcast was so valuable, XYZ," drop us a 5 star. If you're listening to this shit and it's been like 12 episodes deep and you're like, "Yo, I need help launching and scaling a practice," DM us, either of us, and just say, "Go getters." We got you covered. But yo, please drop that 5 star review. Peace.
Till next time. Peace.